So it's been a little while since my last video and I do apologize for that. I meant to be working on an LMG build for the Division 2, but I haven't touched the game since the last video. I got sidetracked playing Destiny 2 for the Solstice of Heroes armor sets and also got hooked on Path of Exile again. There's a reason as to why I'm telling you this. You see, in both of these games, gathering gear for a loadout, Destiny, and for a build, Path of Exile, is not precisely difficult. Destiny's gear is pretty self-explanatory and basic, and the only important things you are chasing for are the perks on the weapons and armor, as there are no stats to chase for. In reality, once you get the perks you need, the next chase is vanity, which for some players is not really relevant, as long as they have the most useful stuff. On Path of Exile, you're looking for gear that synergizes with the skill gems you use and the passives you've taken in the tree, and for that the game throws loot at you really often, but at the same time you can trade with other players for items, you can craft, and while certain things are expensive due to rarity or stats, there's venues to get a character going without much investment. But on the Division 2, gear seems to be in a peculiar situation. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a Fenris chest with 48k armor, 15% crit chance, 15% weapon damage and 50k HP? Sounds like a godly item, right? Well, as far as I'm concerned, no one in the entire community has an item like this. They may have the same combination of attributes, but they are not the same numbers for each stat and armor, and there is a reason as to why. You see, this situation is an issue that is often talked about within the community. And that issue is something that the players call effective stat allowance or the gear budget system. This is going to be a long video, so get something to eat or drink and strap on while we talk about a mechanic that may not be beneficial for the game. Well, that got incredibly dramatic. So the effective stat allowance or gear budget system, or budget system as I'm gonna be referring to from this point onward, is a mechanic that was placed in the game to limit the possible stats on gear. This only affects armor. Weapons and mods do not seem to be afflicted by this mechanic. No, it does not mean that Massive and Ubisoft are intentionally gimping your playtime or chances of getting the best build possible, but it does mean that not every piece of armor or mod that you may be equipping sits at the best possible roll they can get. You may have a nice competent build, but thanks to the budget system that the game has in place, your build is far from being perfect. I'm gonna quote a user by the name of Passeri on Reddit, who has a great analogy explaining the budget system. Quote, "The game makes a glass of lemonade, a mask, but can't spend more than $1 on ingredients. It's also gotta fill up the entire glass with some combination of water, armor, sugar, damage to lids, and lemon juice, critical chance. Each ingredient varies in how expensive it is, so the game could not just make a glass of sugar because sugar is too expensive. Instead, it fills a good portion of it with water since it's relatively cheap, aka the cost of the base armor. This leaves some room left in the glass as well as some money left over to add some amount of sugar and lemon juice. The game could add a bit of lemon juice and a ton of sugar to fill the glass, or the game could instead choose to put a little sugar and a ton of lemon juice. Ideally, if you're looking for a glass of lemonade with as much sugar as possible, you want the game to make one with the lowest amount of lemon juice, or none at all, and as little water as it can afford to put in and still fill up the glass." End quote. So what does this mean? This means that everything inside a piece of armor is bound to a budget of sorts, where even the base armor of the item is considered when allocating the possible rolls the item can spawn with. This means that if you get an item with a high armor roll, even close to the max roll, this will greatly limit the maximum possible attribute stats that spawn on the item. At the same time, if you try to recalibrate an attribute with a big roll on it on the item, where said item may be sitting at a fat armor or attribute roll, the game will limit the recalibration because it has no more space on the item for other large rolls, aka it has run out of budget. So far this doesn't seem very good now, does it? So what's my take on it? First, I do believe that this was done in order to limit the power ceiling of the player. This is because to a degree they wanted to make sure that the player cannot get extremely powerful so that content is always challenging no matter what. It may also be to keep everybody in check so that PvP experiences are not extremely one-sided. But the problem with that statement is that there is already a normalization mechanic in place for PvP environments like Conflict and the Dawn invaded Dark Zones. So why put a budget system besides the normalization system? Is it because they wanted to make the game friendly enough so that there was no disparity between a hardcore player who has min-maxed the living crap out of their build? As such, this person holds no advantage over somebody who is less invested in the game? Or was it implemented to keep players chasing items that simply cannot spawn while also dropping items that resemble those people are chasing? As evil as those theories may sound, I don't believe that's the case. But at the same time, I don't know what to tell you to justify the existence of this system. But what I can tell you is that the system has to either get thrown out of the window entirely, or they implement something that allows players to get more control over the stats in the items they get. And you may ask, why is that? From my own experience, and from what I've seen, from what I've read, these action RPG looter shooter games have a situation where no amount of activities in the game will ever satisfy the entertainment need of the player if there is nothing to look forward to earning or getting. What I mean by this is that challenging content requires equally rewarding things to chase for. In the case of The Division, it is my belief that the endgame chase is about getting items with the best possible rolls to enable different builds and playstyles. To no one's surprise, the endgame activities in the game are extremely repetitive. Yes, you can clear the entire city and hold control points indefinitely as long as you hunt down any assault attempts by the factions. But in the end, eventually, they're gonna take over the control points and all your effort will be for nothing. You can also run missions on the hardest difficulty, or play strongholds, or even raid if you have a team to do so. But in the end, at least in my case, I don't play these activities because they're fun and engaging, no, but because I'm chasing something, a better piece of gear, a better mod, or a better weapon. This is not me hating on the content Ubisoft and Massive have created for the game. The scenarios and activities are beautiful and great on their own way, and I appreciate the amount of detail that was poured into creating the world that we players get to engage with every single day. It's just that when you're chasing certain items with specific attributes or talents, it gets kinda tiresome when the items either spawn with terrible rolls or not even the attributes you need. The budget system limits the possibilities of getting that god roll or an item that you have been chasing for a while now. Yes, you may be able to recalibrate one stat, but the item may still have a stat or attribute that you don't need, and maybe they're even too low to be considered useful, and you're left with a situation where you don't even know if you should equip something that is relatively mediocre or attempt to hunt for something better. It's even worse when you need a talent or an attribute swapped out, because you can only get one thing changed, and that severely limits the usefulness of the loot you find. This budget system gets even worse when you start taking into consideration items from brands like Petrov, Badgertov, Solokov Concern, where they roll with multiple attributes per item. Of what use is having 4 attributes on a chest piece if all the rolls that spawned on the attributes are extremely low or even pointless in your build? With only being able to recalibrate 1 attribute per item, you're still left with 3 things that may not be good or even remotely useful in the build. And this problem is further aggravated when you take into consideration items that have talent slots, because once you recalibrate an attribute, if the item rolled with a talent that does not help the build at all, you're left with an item that is far from being the best in that slot for that specific piece of gear. This situation is not beneficial for the game because it literally makes chasing god rolls or useful items painfully unrewarding. In the end, you're equipping something that is okay at best, and that is not okay, not in a looter shooter and an RPG where the name of the game is min-maxing. As you recall, I mentioned Destiny and Path of Exile earlier. Both games have problems of their own, but that doesn't mean we cannot compare them to The Division, as they kind of share the genre, the action RPG looter shooter thing. In Destiny, if we're being totally honest, there really isn't much depth in regards to the RPG portion. The important thing are the perks that spawn on the weapons and the gear, and since there are no stats to chase, at least not for now, the best perk combinations on the loot are what effectively players are chasing for in the end. God rolls in Destiny often revolve around maximizing the performance of the weapon and kind of synergizing the perks on the gear with the weapon you use. Destiny is more focused around the shooting aliens part than in the min-maxing aspect of an RPG, and while this may change in Shadowkeep, we still have to see if that's going to be true, or at least at what degree are we gonna be able to experiment with stats. Now, in Path of Exile, an action RPG that is constantly evolving, that has been out for years, the game revolves around building a character that synergizes the passive tree with the skills you're using and the gear and weapons you carry, while also being able to min-max the ever-loving crap out of pretty much everything from the skill tree to the gear you're carrying. And there is crafting, there is lots of loot, there is trading with other players, so there are venues to maximize the potential of your build and build anything you want as long as you can afford to invest into your character. But in The Division, the crafting is limited and the gear has different stats that can spawn on it. Not all weapons and armor are able to be crafted. You can recalibrate one attribute or talent on gear and one talent on weapons. You still have to hope that the weapon rolls with the best possible damage and that the armor rolls with useful talents and attributes. When this doesn't happen in the crafting table, nor on the loot that you get while running around doing activities, it disincentivizes you from chasing better stuff. There is trading, and the trading is not really that useful since you only get to share items with the people you were playing an activity with, and that is time gated. Everything is limited, no item is perfect or close to perfection, your time is not rewarded and the fun is not allowed. Exaggeration aside, what do I propose to circumvent this hurdle to lessen the effect of the budget system? Obviously, I'd prefer if this was removed from the game entirely, because I'm petty like that. But I believe it was placed in order to keep a certain degree of balance. So I propose that Massive or Ubisoft, or whoever is making the decisions around here, reintroduces the functions of the optimization station from the first game, but without the extreme benefit of getting every single stat to its maximum roll. What I mean is, the station will only allow you to bump stats inside the item as long as you don't go above the budget. This means that, for example, say you recalibrate 45k HP into a body armor that had weapon damage and headshot damage. In this example, the recalibrated HP is using 82% of the total budget. We have 18% left to work with. That remaining 18% can be used on the station to bump the numbers on the weapon damage, the headshot damage or the armor on the item. At the same time, I say screw it and allow players to recalibrate a talent and an attribute. Why? Because again, with the current system, a lot of gear you get sits far from being best in slot, but if we're able to modify additional things on them, then they may go from being okay to pretty good. Not perfect, but close. Plus, take into consideration that not all items can roll all talents. Some need to be recalibrated into said items. If I have to either sacrifice the talent or an attribute because I'm only allowed to recalibrate one thing, a lot of items just go from having potential to trash. Now, yes, if they remove the budget system, it will break balance, I'm sure of that. And as much as I'd like to say screw balance and it's all about getting overpowered as hell, I'd rather have a system that limits things within reason, aka the budget system, and not limit my character by forcing me to keep him not precisely nerfed, but okay at best, with mediocre or below adequate being the common denominator. Now, not everybody will agree with my proposed fix through the optimization station, as that is pretty much a band-aid fix. But as I said, I'd rather turn potential items into usable ones, instead of just scrapping everything because it did not hit 2/3 of the useful things I required. As you may have noticed, I am passionate about these kinds of games, and it all started back when I used to play on the Xbox 360. I grew fond of the looter shooter / action RPG genres since then, but I've always had this problem where I feel like these games are missing something, that they are limited by something. I really liked the first Division, even though I got to play it a year after it released. I liked the majority of the systems in the first game. Sure, it got to a point where the majority of people were playing Striker or some variation of Striker, but at least people were busy min-maxing here and there, getting god rolls, destroying stuff and having a good time with the game. Sure, it took them a while to get the first game into that position, a very long while, but in the end, the game felt good. There was freedom to build around anything. Then the second game came along, and there is an obvious system in place that is hindering player progression. And it's weird to see it in a looter shooter because, at least to me, I thought that these games were all about the best gear possible that players could earn in order to become super powerful. Seeing somebody with an amazing build provides a sense of wonder and motivates people to chase things specifically, because if someone else did it and it works, you wanna be super powerful as well. I wanna feel like the time I've invested in the game is rewarded. I wanna feel my sense of pride and accomplishment, dang it. But alas, the game limits its own potential. At least in my case, this budget system severely hinders what I can do with the game every time I log and attempt to get another build going. I didn't really care that much when I first got into the endgame. I did not even pay attention to it. But now, when I sit with an almost full stash and almost full character inventory, and I'm only able to work with less than optimal gear, it kinda kills your interest in logging in frequently. There is no use in pre-planning or theory crafting stuff with things like thedivisionbuilder.com, because in the end, you know that you gotta set your gear expectations low thanks to the budget system. Now, I'm not asking you to agree that this is a problem and that you should be worried every single time you go into the Division 2 thinking that it has been made with the goal of ruining your experience in the long run. This is more of a late endgame issue. And that late endgame is what these games are all about. In conclusion, the endgame is where you put your character and build to the test. You're looking to overcome challenges, and you do so by acquiring gear to improve your build, while at the same time, it's the gear that is driving you to complete these challenging activities. When you get gear that improves the behavior of your build, you're motivated to keep grinding to perfect your monster killing machine, to become powerful, overpowered even. When the gear is gimped from the get-go, at first you may not mind it that much, but the longer you invest your time into learning and working with the things that the game gives you, or theory crafting your perfect build, the sooner you realize that you'll never be able to hit that point of accomplishment and you're stuck playing with the bare minimum. I think this needs to change, not because I don't like it, but because it's not just a me problem. Plenty of people have voiced their concern with this mechanic, and it's something that feels extremely out of place, like it was intentionally made to stop players from going above a certain threshold. I don't know if Massive or Ubisoft have plans to change this or do something about it eventually, because as it stands right now, I don't think this system is very beneficial for the game in the long run. Anyways, I know this video is probably going to be controversial and dramatic in a sense, but it's okay. I needed to get this out of my system. It's been bugging me and limiting my fun with the game recently. Having said that, I do have another controversial topic about the Division 2 I want to talk about, but that is for another time. If you got to this point in the video, congratulations! And thank you for watching, and I'd like to hear your opinion on the topic. So yeah, that's all I got to say today. So subscribe, rate, comment, whatever you do, and I'll see you sometime around next week. I don't know. See ya.